Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Thanks for coming here today. Today we're releasing the results of a major survey of American Muslim voters for the presidential election campaign, highlighting various issues that Muslim voters are concerned about and obviously who they will plan to vote for on November 8th. So first we'll hear from our National Executive Director, Nihad Awad, N-I-H-A-D, A-W-A-D, and he'll give an overview of the situation of civic participation for the American Muslim community.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Good morning, everyone. So before we start, let me just remind everyone that the Council on American-Islamic Relations, CAIR, is a non-profit organization. It's a non-partisan organization. And today we are releasing the results of a very important and critical survey that we conducted of American Muslim voters. As you will see the numbers, these numbers tell a story of a Muslim community that is hopeful and worried at the same time. Worried that the national political discourse has deteriorated so much that they feel unsure about their future as American citizens because of the threats of having special policies that will be designed to target them, including forcing them to wear special ID cards, and that they will be monitored, and some of their mosques might be shut down, and Muslims will not be allowed to come to the United States. All these policies, or proposed policies, are a threat to the civil liberties and future of American Muslims, and the numbers will show that they are very worried about what the future might hold for them if the situation continues to deteriorate the way it has been for the past year. Also, this community reports that 30% of them say that they have faced discrimination or profiling in the past year. This is a significant finding. It worries us that 1/3 of the registered Muslim voters report acts of discrimination or profiling in the past year because of the unprecedented rise of Islamophobia that we believe has been fueled, promoted, justified, and pushed by prominent presidential candidates, mainly within the GOP, started with Ben Carson and culminated with Donald Trump. These numbers also tell the story of a hopeful and determined and resilient community who believes in the future, and they believe that it is very important for them to participate civically, not only to defend their rights, but to make their voices heard by both parties, and also to help maintain and protect the American traditions of protections, equal rights for every American. CAIR and the Muslim community have been working hard to educate voters, registered voters to vote, and mobilize the Muslim community to be engaged in this year's election. The American, or the largest Muslim coalition, which is the USCMO, the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, has been urging Muslim Americans to register to vote. They have been conducting the largest voter mobilization in the history of the Muslim community with the famous campaign that's called One America campaign. Hundreds of mosques have become centers for voter registration, and hundreds of Friday prayer gatherings have been activities to promote and push the community to register to vote and make their voices heard. So despite being at the receiving end of bigotry and hate crimes, the Muslim community, as I said, is determined to make its voice heard this year. We at CAIR, we possess the largest Muslim database, 1.5 million Muslim registered and unregistered voters. Out of that, we have about 850,000 people who are registered to vote, and we're urging the 750,000 to register to vote before the deadline. And Robert McCaw will give you more details on the demographics of this database. But let me just share with you the major findings of this survey, and Robert will give you more detail. 86% of registered Muslim voters intend to vote in this year's presidential election. 72% of Muslim voters intend to vote to elect Hillary Clinton. And 4% they would like to vote for Donald Trump. The 6 top issues that Muslim American voters care about are civil rights, education, jobs and the economy, protecting students from bullying and harassment, a proposed ban on Muslim traveling to the US, and terrorism and national security. It is important to note that 93% of those who were surveyed believe that it is important to defeat ISIS or Daesh. 91% of respondents believe that Donald Trump's proposal to temporarily ban Muslims is the wrong decision. And as I said earlier, 30% of American Muslim voters who were surveyed report that they have experienced acts of discrimination and profiling in the past year. One final note. You will notice that in the past 16 years, there has been a major shift among American Muslim voters. In the year 2000, in the 2000 presidential elections, the overwhelming majority of American Muslims have voted for the Republican ticket, and they voted for George Bush then. Over the years, the GOP has managed to alienate and lose this once reliable voting bloc, the American Muslim voting bloc, because of policies that have targeted the American Muslim community, and because the GOP has allowed bigotry and anti-Muslim sentiment to dominate its national and political discourse. We believe that this is a time for the GOP to reflect and examine its policies towards minorities and especially the Muslim community. I will let my colleagues now to give you further information on the results of the survey. Thank you.
I don't think I told you who I am. My name is Ibrahim Hooper. I'm National Communications Director for CAIR. And to give the actual results, the specifics of the results of the survey, we have CAIR Government Affairs Director Robert McCaw.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. My name is Robert McCaw. I'm CAIR's Government Affairs Director. I had the privilege of overseeing the survey we're revealing today. I'm just going to go into a brief mention of the methodology of the survey, and then we're just going to jump directly into the results. So this survey surveyed 804 respondents from the Muslim American community who are registered to vote and have 2 or more traditional Muslim names. And we have a list of over 45,000 traditional Muslim names that we ran across a national database of registered voters nationwide. This survey was conducted after the second presidential debate from September 27th to October 5th. 314 men were surveyed and 816 women were surveyed. It has a margin of error of 3.5%. In addition to the survey results at the end of it, I'm going to go into some demographic indicators of who the survey respondents were, looking at their age, gender, education, income, and religiosity. So just jumping straight into the survey results, when asked about their intention to vote in the election, again, as Nihad said, 86% of Muslim voters said they plan to vote, with 74% saying they definitely will vote, and another 12% saying that they probably will. In addition, we see that only a small fraction of those who are registered to vote do not intend to vote. Again, when we look at the domestic issues of American Muslims, the top issues were civil rights, education, jobs in the economy, protecting students from bullying, Donald Trump's proposed ban on Muslims traveling to the U.S., terrorism and national security, and defeating ISIS. What we see are that American Muslims are primarily concerned with domestic policy issues, but not traditional social wedge issues. So the Muslim community, the registered voters, are more concerned about how well their jobs are going, how good of an education their children are receiving, and of course the top issue being how well are their civil rights being protected. And that is what is going to inform their choice in a candidate running for office. When we look at U.S. Muslim perception of political ideology, the majority of American Muslims actually identify as being moderate. Only 25% liberal, and then just 11% as conservative. The community itself is pretty politically balanced, and with such a large moderate majority could really go, if the circumstances were ideal, to either party. When we look at U.S. Muslim political party affiliation, this poll suggests that the past trend of Muslims increasingly aligning with the Democratic Party has stabilized. 67% said that they consider themselves to be members of the Democratic Party, very similar to 12 years ago where 66% said, after increasing from 49% in 2008. Those who identified as being or supporting the Republican Party was 6%, which remained relatively the same since 2008, where it was 9%. This signals that it's an end in the trend of decline in Muslim support for the Republican Party, where it was down from 17% in 2006. This year, we actually decided to expand political party affiliation to the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, and essentially 3% respectively in the Muslim community identify as either supporting the Green or Libertarian Party. Again, we also see the independent or unaffiliated is 18% of the community this year. That's a very important number. That means that there are still a number of American Muslim voters that could be swayed either way in this election. And, you know, we're still asking candidates at the local level, the state level, and the national level to consider this when they're vying for the American Muslim vote, which is well positioned to tip elections, especially in swing states like Florida, Virginia, and Ohio. When we look at U.S. Muslim perception of party commitment to core principles, you know, we asked American Muslims what they thought and which party truly stands up for what it believes in, treating citizens equally, upholding the Constitution, and protecting religious freedom. In every single profile, American Muslims supported or believed that the Democratic Party supported these values more so than the Republican Party, where 56% of respondents believe that the Democratic Party is more likely to uphold the U.S. Constitution. 71% of respondents feel that the Democratic Party is more concerned with protecting religious freedom, as compared to the 3% of Muslims that thought the Republican Party was more committed to upholding religious freedom. 73% of respondents said that the Democratic Party is more likely to treat people equally versus the 3% of respondents that said it was the Republican Party, and that's down for Republicans from 6% in 2012. And 53% of respondents said that the Democratic Party does stand up for what they believe in versus 48% in 2012, so that's a significant increase. And we see that 7% of respondents who favored the Republican Party in this category, and that was down from 11% in the previous year. Overall, no more than 7% of Muslim voters evaluated the Republican Party as being more favorable on any one of these issues. So, in asking Muslim voter perception of party friendliness to our community, each party was evaluated kind of on a friendliness meter, whether it was friendly, neutral, or unfriendly. 61% of respondents said that the Democratic Party was friendly towards Muslims, while 7% said it was the Republican Party that was friendly. By contrast, 62% said that the Republican Party was unfriendly towards Muslims, while only 2% said that Democrats were unfriendly. In comparison to 2012, Muslims over the past 4 years have developed a more favorable perception of the Democratic Party and a less favorable perception of the Republican Party. So, again, one of the biggest news indicators of this press conference is that U.S. Muslims prefer Hillary Clinton more than any other candidate. And so in a choice between Republican, Democratic, Libertarian, and Green Party candidates, those who plan to vote in the election were just asked to name their candidate of choice. 12% of voters remain undecided in comparison to the 25% that were surveyed in 2012. Both these surveys were conducted in October, and an additional 7% refused to answer, making it about 19% of Muslims have not expressed which candidate they are going to support in this election. So again, there's a lot of Muslim votes up for grab in that 6 to 8 million U.S. population. So a majority of American Muslim voters, 72%, plan to vote for Democratic Party candidate Hillary Clinton, and this is up from 68% that planned to cast ballots for Barack Obama in 2012. Only 4% of Muslim voters plan to vote for Republican Party candidate Donald Trump, and that's down from 7% that had planned to cast their votes for Mitt Romney in 2012. And 3% of Muslim voters plan to support Green Party candidate Jill Stein, and only 2% plan to support Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson. You know, as Nihad mentioned earlier, 30% of respondents said that they have experienced discrimination or profiling in the United States in the past year because of their ethnic or religious background. 30%, again, is a very large number. That's 1/3 of Muslim registered voters in our survey reported being discriminated against. Again, over 60% perceived that Islamophobia has, I think 80% have perceived that Islamophobia has risen in the past year, and 30% of that community was actually, they faced the brunt of that historic rise in anti-Muslim discrimination and violence. I think this is a really important number to remember, and CAIR has switched from asking in the past 15 years or 16 years past 9/11, have you faced discrimination? But really the trend holds up that 30% of the overall community faces this type of discrimination. So the next couple categories of questions, we actually asked Muslim views and opinions of very current and relevant policy issues. The first question we asked the Muslim community was whether the U.S. provided enough support in the past year to combat and defeat ISIS. Nearly half said that the U.S. had not provided enough support, while only 26% said that the U.S. had provided enough support. Again, when we look back to what are the primary issues motivating Muslims in this election, defeating ISIS was one of those top issues. So that's definitely reflected in this survey question. Next, and this is, no surprise to CAIR as a Muslim community organization, we asked Muslim voters, is Donald Trump's proposed temporary ban on Muslim travelers entering the U.S. the right decision? Thank you. And 91%, the overwhelming majority, the highest respondent to really any question in this survey, said that Donald Trump's Muslim ban was the wrong decision. Only 3% said it was the right decision. You have to remember we have a margin of error of 3.5%. So that kind of figures into it. Again, such a proposal just wouldn't be perceived by the Muslim community to be in our community's interest, even though we do value national security as a highlighted issue when polled. Looking at Islamophobia, as mentioned earlier, 85% of the community of registered voters believe that it had increased in the past year. Again, that is a significant number that I don't have to drill into too much more. A very relevant question a number of Muslim voters were asked was, do you support or oppose Syrian refugees resettling in the United States? And 82% of the U.S. Muslim voter community said that they would support resettling refugees inside the United States, with only 7% opposing the idea. And this is a much talked about question in the Muslim community, but it's really, I don't think it's ever been surveyed like this before. So we asked Muslim voters what they thought about the effectiveness of overseas U.S. military campaigns defeating terrorism overseas. And so the majority, 85%, actually believe U.S. military campaigns aimed at defeating terrorism actually creates resentment and could possibly lead to more terrorism, while conversely only 18% believe such campaigns are effective. 24% did abstain from answering that question. Just going into a few demographics about who the respondents of this survey is and what Muslim voters, especially with double matching traditional Muslim names, what their attitudes and experiences are in the U.S. We found that 66% of registered Muslim voters attend their masjid for prayer at least once or twice a month, with at least 45 saying that they attend once a week. So I think that's a high level of religiosity. When we look at just involvement in non-prayer activities, community activities, supporting the activities at the mosque, we actually found a combined 41% were very involved with their mosque outside of prayer or somewhat involved. Again, when we asked Muslim voters what their religious denomination was, the majority identified as Sunni, followed by people just identifying as Muslim, neither being Sunni or Shia or other sect, and then 7% identifying as Shia Muslim. We asked respondents what their gender was, and it was pretty near balance, with 53% identifying as male, 47% as female. And when you look at the age distribution of the survey, 28% of the respondents were under 40, which is actually very good for a landline survey. Going to the next slide. When we look at the educational attainment of Muslims surveyed, 66% have a 4-year degree or greater as for their educational attainment, which in general is higher than the national average. Again, when we look at, and then when we look at annual household income, 52% are making more than $50,000 or more a year, which again is also above the national average. When we polled on marital status, the majority of respondents were married, with just a small distribution being divorced or single. When we looked at respondent employment status, we found that 58% were employed, and I'd be interested in breaking down the numbers to see for unemployed how many are of college age or are at retirement age. And then when we look at, of those people who are employed, we have a very good diversity amongst Muslim voters for occupational profiles, with 14% being business owners, 10% being doctors, 11% being teachers, and 9% being engineers. American Muslims really do represent the fabric of this nation, and obviously they're contributing to the greater benefit of our nation. When we looked at the respondents, we found that 78% identified as being born overseas, and this isn't actually too far off from the State's Department estimate that some 66% or more American Muslims are born overseas. When we actually then poll those U.S., and these are U.S. citizens, mind you, how long they've been in the United States, the majority, 78%, said that they had been here for 20 years or longer, and another 18% had been here for 10 to 19 years. So the respondent voters have been in the U.S. for quite a long time. They're aware of the political environment, and the decisions they make are very much informed. And then when we did a breakdown of respondent ethnicity from where their ancestors had hailed from, we did see a majority, 57% of the respondents were South Asian, 18% of the respondents were Arab, and then we had a fine breakdown of other regional ethnicities that had participated in the survey. And that would conclude the survey. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Now, if anybody has any questions, we'd be glad to take them at this time. Any questions?
Only CAIR conducted this survey?
Yeah, it was contracted with a private independent survey.
Muslims organization?
No, I mean, it's quite usual for just one organization to do these kinds of surveys.
What type of questions you make for the Hillary Clinton supporters? Did you focus only on Muslims issue or in general topics in America like healthcare?
Everything, healthcare, education, employment, the economy. In fact, as Robert, I think, outlined, the issues of importance, as Muslim voters rated them, were mainly domestic issues. And the international issues came toward the bottom of that scale.
Was the survey for the 50 states or specific states?
Yeah, it was nationwide. Nationwide.
Yeah, Mr. Abraham, due to the fact that Hillary Clinton has some legal issues lately, don't you think that had affected somehow on the Muslim vote? My first question. My second question. Do you think, does CAIR think that the damage is already done and that our community has been deeply damaged by Mr. Donald Trump's declarations?
Well, first of all, as Nihad said in the beginning, we're a nonpartisan organization, so we just ask the questions. It's really up to the voters themselves to determine why they make their decisions the way they do. As far as the damage done by Donald Trump, unfortunately, I think he has, over the past year or so, mainstreamed Islamophobia. The anti-Muslim bigotry that was at the fringe of society has moved, through his efforts largely, to the mainstream of society, and I think we'll be paying the price of that even after the November elections. I don't know if Nihad, did you have something you wanted to say on that? Or?
Yeah, I concur with Ibrahim that we believe that the damage to civil rights of Muslims, to the image of Islam, and to the sense of security and belonging within American Muslims has been severely damaged. And we are going to be dealing with the effects of this campaign to silence, marginalize American Muslims for many years to come. And we see it at the ground level. We see it when communities permits to build mosques or expand schools are rejected at the zoning boards or city councils. There's a massive effort among the Islamophobia network in America to push the Muslim community to the margin and to deny it its constitutional rights to be a Muslim American community. And unfortunately also I have to note that the crazy idea of Donald Trump to ban Muslims from coming to the United States came from an anti-Muslim group, mainly the Center for Security Policy and Frank Gaffney. So the damage has been there because there is a network of anti-Muslim activists and organizations that are presenting ideas to silence and marginalize American Muslims, and also suggesting to conduct hearings in Congress to question the loyalty of the American Muslim community, starting from Peter King hearings and ending with Ted Cruz. So there has been a political push to silence the Muslim community and confiscate its rights. And this damage, unfortunately, has been felt by the community and will be with us for months and years to come, regardless of the outcome of the November 8th election.
Some Muslims says that Donald Trump has a good plan to fight terror overseas.
and nobody knows what that plan is. So he's been talking emotionally about fighting terrorism, and definitely as American Muslims, we're very much interested in making sure that groups like ISIS are defeated. However, the rhetoric of Donald Trump is helping the agenda and propaganda of ISIS, because he's perpetuating the idea that Islam and modernity are in conflict and Islam and the West are in war.
But this is what Hillary Clinton says.
Well, you know, again,
Support of Hillary?
no, as a non-partisan organization, we always say to politicians that it is not fair to project and portray the American Muslim community through national security prism. The American Muslim community, as we have shown here, are highly productive members of the community. They love this country. They work hard to make it better and stronger. 10% of the Muslim voters who were surveyed are physicians, with doctors, dentists, and so on. So the Muslim community is making America stronger again every day, and they should be celebrated. They should be appreciated, and the national security issues are important, but they should not be the issues that define the contribution of every American Muslim every day.
Do you think that it would be better to release this survey like a week before the November 8th, or now is the better?
Again, the timing is not political. We decided to conduct the survey around this time without any political consideration, but we believe it is important for both parties and the general public to see that American Muslims are worried about the future, but also they're determined and resilient to make their voices heard through the ballot box.
Let me add, Mr. Ibrahim, both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama had been very cautious in using the word Islamic terrorism. On the other hand, we hear the rhetoric of Islamic terrorism, whether in the convention, whether by Giuliani, whether by Mr. Donald Trump. How was your response? And briefly, how would you respond to such allegations?
Quickly, okay. I will say quickly on this again. Words matter. There is no such thing called radical Islamic terrorism. Terrorism knows no faith, no boundaries, no ethnicities. There are acts of terrorism and violent acts that take place every day in America, and just check the website of the FBI. You will see that the overwhelming majority of acts of terrorism that take place in the United States and against U.S. interests around the world are conducted by people who are not of the Islamic faith. Secondly, the use of this rhetorical language again came from anti-Muslim activists such as Daniel Pipes and Stephen Emerson, and the GOP allowed itself to be exploited to adopt an offensive language to refer to the totality of the Muslim community. And we believe that it is not just politically incorrect, it is not right. Because when they examine terrorism, they should be open-minded, and when they use one label to describe one individual or one group, we have many groups and many individuals that deserve that label. So the political choice and designation of terrorism to assign it to Muslims and people who do not belong to the Islamic faith needs to be seriously examined. And I believe that the GOP allowed itself to utilize and use political offensive language to serve the interest of a small minority within the Republican Party at the expense of the American Muslim community's rights to be safe and to be treated equally.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
This report said 86% of registered Muslim voters intend to vote this year, and indicated likely high turnout. So do you have a number for 2012 and 2008 to say?
What I do know, and Robert can maybe offer more details on that, it's much higher than the national average of voter turnout. I think, what is the national average? Something like 50% or?
Actual national.
Here.
Sure. So when you actually look at the national average of Americans turning out to vote, it's between the elections 15 to 25%. of the American public. Now, this is a subset of the American Muslim community. These are Muslims who are registered to vote. But among those Muslims who are registered to vote, an overwhelming majority intend to vote.
She was asking about
And then when you look at previous years, when we track just registered Muslim voters, not the overall Muslim population, but registered voters, registered Muslims on average in 2012 also turned out in the high 70s, 80% for Barack Obama as well.
Do you remember the previous?
I don't remember the previous exactly, but I do remember that it was overwhelmingly larger than the national average.
So you're saying, so I understand that it's overwhelmingly higher, it's a national average, but do you see the trend of increasing, or this particular issue is higher because of such drawn?
Sure. So overall, among registered Muslim voters, there is a higher percentage in interest in voting. I think the positive news we can say is CAIR released another study where we tracked the names of those people who registered to vote from 2012 to 2016. What we found is 300,000 people with traditional Muslim or Arabic names registered to vote. And so not only do we see that registered voters turn out in higher volume, but that the Muslim community itself is catching up, that they're interested in the election, that they're civically engaged, and that they're building capacity.
I think maybe the core of your question is it higher this year than in previous years because of maybe the increased Islamophobia? Is that what you're... I can't show you data for that, but it would be my guess based on experience and just observation that would be the case, that Muslims are more involved this year because they feel besieged by the toxic rhetoric that they're hearing on a daily basis.
I didn't see the harassment, like sexual harassment or gender issue in here as consideration.
I don't know that was a question we asked.
You know what? What I
don't
can do is, if I get your contact information, I'll break down the data between men voters and women voters and see what is the difference between reporting, profiling, or harassment or discrimination.
Okay.
All right.
My understanding, there is a big shifting here for the Muslim society in America. Before, like years ago, the Palestinian issue was a very important topic for them to vote for the Republican or the Democrats. Did CAIR include this question?
Well, I think historically our surveys have shown domestic issues more important. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but
also, as Ibrahim and Robert said, the main concerns when it comes to domestic issues are civil rights, national security, jobs, education, school bullying against children, and so on. However, the foreign policy is still important to the Muslim community. But today they believe, as Ibrahim said, that the Muslim community feels besieged by the anti-Muslim rhetoric. So we wanted to project that the Muslim community is concerned about this. It does not take away from the Muslim community's interest and concern about foreign policy. In fact, as the slides show, that the majority of Muslims believe that the U.S. military campaigns to defeat terrorism is ineffective. And of course, now the region is in flame beyond the issue of Palestine, Israel. So they continue to believe that foreign policy is important, but I believe now they're talking about protection of themselves, at home.
all right. I think we'll end it there, and if you have further questions, we'll do one-on-ones with any of the people here. But thanks again for coming.